my channel. My name is Martine, and if you are new here, I do videos on Vedic astrology mainly, but also with some tropical insights, and I focus on both relationship and natal astrology. And if you like this video and you would like to see more content from me, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to my channel. Also consider clicking the notifications bell if you want to see when I will post a new video. Also, if you are interested in a private reading, I do readings in astrology on a variety of topics ranging from relationship readings to career to transits for 2-3 years, or solar return charts or predictions for 1 year, etc. You are free to email me at the email address that I will leave in the video description, and I can send you a pricing list and reading options and any other details that you might require. Also, I want to mention that I have started membership options on this channel, and the short of it, just to give you the short perks that you will get if you choose to join the membership section, you will get 1 extra video per month for each membership stage or tier. So for the first tier, you will get 1 extra video per month. For the second tier, you will get 2 extra videos per month, so you will have access to level 1 and level 2 videos. And for level 3 or third tier, you will get 3 extra videos per month. The level 1 and level 3 videos are going to be on a variety of topics, so basically anything related to astrology, but it will be content that is not shown on my regular usual videos, right? So this is members only exclusive content, and it can range from, tips and tricks on how to read a horoscope to, I haven't done this yet, but I plan on doing maybe members only astrological synastry for famous couples, for instance, or the analysis of famous people's horoscopes, but then I can also get into divisional charts, etc., etc. So all kinds of things. The level 1 or second tier of membership options is especially related to synastry astrology topics, meaning relationship-oriented astrology. So this could be things like how to discover which kind of partner archetype is right for you according to your horoscope, or it could be, again, different characteristics, whether you're going to have a good marriage according to your horoscope or a less than stellar marriage. But you can find more concrete examples in the lists that you will find in the video description, because I have added the playlists where you can already see all the videos that I have posted in each members section. So yeah, you can see what videos you will have access to from the ones that I have already done. But I will continue to post, like I said, 1 extra video per month for each level of membership. And in addition to that, in the members only section, you will have access to members only polls, and you will also have priority when it comes to getting your comments replied to on my channel. And you will also have stickers that basically show up next to your username that show that you are a member, and a couple of exclusive emojis. All right, so that's pretty much all the perks that you can have as a member on my channel. If you're curious, you can check the video description for more details as well, or you can click the join button under any of my videos to also see the prices, because the prices will be shown in your local currency. All right, in addition to the members only section, I also have a tarot channel, and I post there semi-regularly, and I will be linking the tarot channel in the video description as well as in the pinned comment. It's called Martine's Tarot. So if you are curious about tarot, if you're into it, maybe check out my channel, maybe subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it. Thank you very much for listening to this intro. And now I'm going to get straight into today's topic. Hello and welcome to part 2 of Asteroid Nessus and Abuse, according to the natal chart. So as I have mentioned in the first part, this is going to be mostly about examples because the first part already dragged on for much too long, so I figured I would spread this in 2 parts. But as I was getting ready to record this, I just remembered that I forgot to talk about a very important part. Nobody commented so far in the first, under the first video, but I'm guessing it's because the video is so long that nobody reached the end yet. Even though I posted it about 24 hours ago. Less than 24 hours to be fair. Anyway, the important part that I mentioned to talk about is, of course, the ascendant. That is one thing. So aspects between, well, most importantly about Nessus in the first house conjunct the ascendant. Just a parenthesis, a short parenthesis. In Vedic astrology, as long as 2 planets or 2 points are in the same sign, it is considered to be a conjunction. Now, of course, the tighter the orb is, the stronger the conjunction, the stronger the influence of the conjunction, but it will still be a conjunction nevertheless. So basically, that means if you have ascendant in, let's say, 2 degrees Aries and Nessus in 25 degrees Aries, that's still a conjunction. But it would be particularly strong if it would be, let's say, up to 12 degrees Aries, right? So if Nessus would be up to 12 degrees Aries and your ascendant is in 2 degrees Aries, that would mean an orb difference of no more than 10 degrees. That would be particularly potent as a conjunction. It's still potent nevertheless. I'm just saying that the tighter the orb, the stronger the conjunction. And also I mentioned this in a video that I did a long time ago about, I forgot what I titled it, honestly, but it was something about how to read aspects or sequence of aspects, something like that, where I actually mentioned that based on what I've seen through reading very many horoscopes over 2 decades now, is that actually the tighter the orb is, particularly with conjunctions, the more unconscious the pattern is. So it's, if you have a conjunction, let's say, that is within less than 1 degree apart, it shows that that is a potential blind spot in your psyche. It's something that you're not even conscious of doing, but other people see it about you very strongly. But anyway, this is a parenthesis. I'm going to close it. I'm going to try to look for that video. If not, please remind me in the comment section if you don't find it, because I do think it's an important video, although I remember at the time that I recorded it, not too many people watched it. So yeah, I'm going to try to find it and see if I can link it in the video description, but in case I forget, like I said, please remind me in the comment section. So Nessus in the ascendant. This is a really heavy placement, as one would expect, just like Lilith in the first house. Well, any planet in the first house basically heavily influences a person's trajectory through life, because actually, especially according to traditional Vedic interpretation, the ascendant and or the first house show the path that the physical incarnation that the soul is on throughout this lifetime. So it's heavily impactful. This is why the ascendant rules your base personality, right? So when you look at it, even from a psychological perspective, personality is a set of characteristics that you develop almost as a coping mechanism in relation to your environment throughout your life, but particularly in early childhood, roughly, I don't know, let's say the first 20 years of your life, but the first 7 years of your life, I remember reading studies about this, are basically a state of extreme, impressionability for a child. I remember reading about this, that the brain is almost like a recording device in the first 7 years, that the subconscious part of our brain is much more strongly developed, and the conscious or the rational part, of course, is less developed. So this is why children in the first 7 years are, according even to colloquialisms nowadays, like a sponge. So they absorb things very easily. So it's very difficult to unlearn habits that you learn early on in the first 7 years of life. This is also why abuse happening in early childhood is particularly impactful as well. But again, closing this other parenthesis. So Nessus in the first house tends to play out as this person having experienced some very significant forms of abuse. And again, based on empirical knowledge of a lot of horoscopes that I've looked at, it does tend to show people who go through repeated abuse of different kinds, but particularly abuse that really shapes the way that they view themselves. And in a similar way to the sun basically being aspected by Nessus, because the sun is the karaka normally associated with the first house. You would think it's Mars because Mars is the natural ruler of Aries and the first house corresponds to Aries, but no, it's actually the sun. I haven't actually talked about what karakas rule which houses, I think, ever on this channel, but I did consider many times making a video on numerology because it's particularly poignant to talk about this connection between karakas and planets, between karakas and what houses they rule and how this ties to numerology. But anyway, don't want to digress right now. Please let me know, again, if any of these topics sound attractive to you in the comment section, and that would be a hint for me to focus on doing them. But, yeah, so the first house having Nessus in there, particularly when it's in the first house, to some extent also when the ascendant is aspected by Nessus, by opposition, by square, to a lesser degree also by trine and sextile, this person goes through some kind of life-shaping level of abuse that really affects their confidence, really affects their, sometimes even their perception of reality, again, depending heavily on what else is going on around this position, this configuration of Nessus in the first house. You could get different results. But overall, it does tend to show some pretty painful life experiences for this person. Oftentimes, it actually even shows people that are known as somehow having been victimized in some significant way. So somehow it becomes a part of their, it becomes a part of how other people recognize them, of what people associate with them, because the first house is the house of how you show up in the world, what is visible about you, how people see you, on a very basic level. There are other things that will show the same thing, of course, especially Arud Halagna, which again, I have an entire playlist on, I will be linking at in the video description. It's actually, again, as a parenthesis, it would be interesting to look at charts that have Nessus in the Arud Halagna, but that would be some very extensive research. I haven't gotten into it, but, food for thought, and also I'm considering maybe looking into that in the future. But Nessus in the first house already, even without being connected to the Arud Halagna, which technically would even more so point to how other people perceive you and your general image in the world, it's still, even in the first house of the natal horoscope, tends to show cases where people really know this person as having been victimized in some very significant way, In some cases, which are more tragic, the person themselves tends to develop a kind of victim view of the world. I tend to avoid saying this, and I don't even like saying it, because as far as I've seen, that's not most of the times the case. But again, it's kind of complicated for me to get into this, because the general idea is that this thing of, how people see you versus who you really are boils down a lot of the times to projections and what people project on you and all that. And in fact, again, opening a parenthesis, again, speaking of projections, I would not be surprised, so I haven't actually done research on this, but I would not be surprised, just based on general theory from astrology, if people with Nessus in the Arud Halagna would be perceived as victimized even when they themselves don't feel like a victim. Because again, the Arud Halagna is about projections and what other people project on you. Now, there is an aspect of Nessus where there are two more things that I haven't really touched upon now that I think about it. So I did say that this video is going to be only about examples, but now I am remembering things that I have not mentioned in the first part, and better late than never, right? So there are two aspects. One of them is how Nessus plays out in houses. I think I did touch upon it maybe briefly, but I didn't get too in depth with it. And then the second aspect would be the topic of victim versus abuser. Okay, because even according to some interpretations that I have seen from way back from tropical astrology, there is the situation where people who have prominently placed Nessus tend to be perceived as villains somehow. And again, this kind of can be traced back to sorry, not astrology, but psychology, right? And the eternally forming bridge that, or dance between astrology and psychology, because when a person is victimized, of course, and this is a pretty commonly known thing in psychology, they have higher chances than average of actually becoming an abuser themselves. So there's, again, I don't want to get too much into this, but I'm sure you can find resources that explain it. The short of it, I mean, if you want to look at it like this, is oftentimes people who are victimized, especially in severe ways, they feel so not just wronged, but misunderstood a lot of the times, because nobody else can really understand their perspective and their experience. And so the only solution that they find to basically, to express what has happened to them is to in turn abuse someone else, and therefore somehow feel like someone else is going to understand them now because they went through the same abuse, if that makes sense. It's a really twisted sort of dynamic, but it is something that psychologists have talked about, as far as I have seen. At least I remember reading articles about it, and it also makes sense logically if you think about it. And so I think because of this mechanism, and I have seen this also a lot through, again, empirical research, that people who, especially people who have Nessus in the ascendant, especially, but not only, they tend to have this kind of bad guy image, like bad guy, bad girl, right? So they sometimes come across as this kind of person that a lot of people don't want to mess with, because people just assume that they're going to be potentially aggressive and even potentially abusive. Of course, again, a lot has to be looked at from the perspective of the entire horoscope, but I have seen this in situations where, for instance, there are people who come across as intimidating, and you would not necessarily see that from other placements in their horoscope. So it does seem to be something that is purely Nessus energy showing up in their horoscope. So these are the main things that I wanted to talk about. Now, with respect to Nessus's influence by houses, so going back to the general theory of astrology, which I have mentioned many times in many videos, and you may already know from other places, the planetary placement by sign shows how, and the house shows where. And when it comes to houses, the where refers to what area of life is going to be most impacted. This is also why when Nessus is sitting in the first house, of course, it's the entire life trajectory that is going to be extremely impacted by this Nessus placement, right? So whatever potential abuse this person is going to experience is going to be life-altering. It's going to shape their entire personality, their sense of identity, their sense of confidence, the way that they present themselves to the world. This is why a lot of the times, of course, like I said, so some of these people will either tend to be perceived as victims if they overly identify with being victimized, or they can be seen as bullies if they start to overcompensate for the victimization they experienced and lean more into, dealing with their trauma the hard way by taking their power back by force, unfortunately. So there's that. But when it comes to other houses, again, depending on what house Nessus falls into, you have potential types of impact. So if Nessus is going into the second house, which again could be the way you talk. So the second house is, well, first of all, the second house is about family of origin. It's also about your ability to acquire fixed assets, your savings. It shows eating habits. It rules the mouth and the throat. So similarly, actually, to having, let's say, a Venus, similarly in some ways, right, to having a Venus-Nessus contact, when Nessus is falling in the second house, the self-esteem of the person can be impacted. So this person could have, low self-esteem. They could have speech impediments that are caused by traumas. And again, the house is kind of like a 2-in-1 situation, because it could show at the same time the type of impact that the abuse has on your life and where that abuse came from. So what part of your life was receiving abuse? And so again, in the second house being the house of the family of origin, this can also show that this person experienced abuse at the hands of members of the family of origin. Because the second house is about the face, the neck, this could literally show potential damage to the face, to the neck, or again, it could show a psychosomatic situation where this person develops ailments connected to these areas of the body because of the abuse they faced, or like I said, potential speech impediments because the second house rules the voice as well. Third house actually would be more connected to speech impediments, but second house can also be, in a way. In fact, with second house, you are more likely to see things like people just becoming, dumb. As in, they can't, mute, basically. They don't talk anymore. And it could be a psychosomatic thing. It could be induced by trauma, for example, or some kind of issues with the vocal cords, or like I said, could be a psychosomatic situation. And second house could also be in a way, again, connected to anything that involves nourishment. So this could be a situation where you could go through wrongdoings at the hands of a nutritionist or a doctor that is supposed to help you with your diet or your throat or your face or anything. Again, be very careful with surgery here or any kind of cosmetic enhancements to the face or the neck, because again, these could go wrong. Like someone could actually turn out to be against you, I don't know, like a surgeon or something that will botch a cosmetic procedure and cause you great suffering. In a roundabout way, this could also show abuse because of your appearance, because of maybe something connected to your face or your throat. But I would have to look more into that. I haven't really looked into these connections specifically where, except intuitively, I wouldn't be surprised if I actually saw it. But yeah, these kinds of connections where you would see what kind of abuse you would experience, right? Or yeah, due to the places that this house represents in a similar way, because again, the second house is the family of origin. This could show maybe you experience bullying because of your family of origin, whether that was because of social status or anything else that was going on there. And speaking of social status, second house is also money and finances, like I said, so it's about savings. So this could be financial abuse, or this could be abuse because of your finances, right? I don't know, being picked on because of the fact that you came from a modest background financially. But again, a lot would have to be looked at from other points in the horoscope to see more specific details of what kind of abuse or experiences could happen here. If Nessus is in the third house, then you would see, again, the third house is about younger siblings, neighbors, neighborhood, short-term or short-distance travel, communication, ideas, any form of communication, whether it's written or oral. To some extent also vehicles, I guess, but anything connected to short-term, short-distance travels. So here with the third house, I wouldn't be surprised if you ran into a lot of potentially nasty taxi drivers who try to give you crap, or are very rude, right? Or similar situations where with any person that is in charge of transportation, again, particularly for short distance or short-term travels. That's the third house. Again, you could also have abusive neighbors. You can have really shitty neighbors here. You could have experienced abuse due to a younger sibling. And similarly to the second house, the speech could have been affected, or your method of communication, the way that you feel also about your ability to take charge and to be proactive in life, because the third house, especially according to Vedic perspective, is the house that is most connected to independence. This is why the third house is very important in the horoscopes of people who become entrepreneurs. Because having a very strong third house means that you are able to grab the bull by the horns, take matters into your own hands and be proactive. And so having Nessus here would most likely show that you're someone who has experienced some kind of wounding when it comes to your ability to get what you want. And to also, to some extent, to stand on your own 2 feet and deal with obstacles by yourself. So that could happen. Again, you also have to look into other configurations and how Nessus and this configuration plays out in the entire horoscope. Then again, you could also have speech impediments here, or communication problems, maybe writing issues. You're not confident about your writing because, I don't know, a younger sibling made fun of you or something, right? Things like these could happen with the third house. Now, in a purely anatomical sense, the third house also rules the respiratory system, the arms, the hands, the shoulders. So there could actually be abuse that impacts these anatomical areas as well. To some extent also the nervous system, as far as I've seen with the third house and with Mercury in general. Okay, so like weird nerve issues, twitches, nervous tics or something you might develop due to abuse. So of course, any kind of psychosomatic issues, but particularly the ones that are impacting these areas of the body that are connected to the third house. Fourth house, when Nessus is sitting in the fourth house, again, fourth house is primarily the house of the mother and the mother side of the family, but it is very strongly connected to your cultural background, your family background. So it actually rules the home environment, the early childhood and educational process up until high school. So up until high school graduation, that is fourth house. And once you move into the fifth house, that is college and above. PhD would be ninth house. But anyway, fourth house, right? So when Nessus is sitting here, again, this primarily would show abuse experienced in the early home, right? The early life environment. So again, this would point to the family of origin, or whoever were your primary caregivers could have been abusive. Your mother, of course, would be the primary suspect because fourth house is primarily the house of mother figures. Then you could also have experienced abuse within your culture, right? So in your culture of origin. Fourth house can also be anything involving real estate. So restaurants, again, any kind of property that you want to buy or rent, this would be fourth house. Agencies, people that are working in real estate, vehicles, anyone involved with vehicles, right? So you could experience abuse from any of these categories of people. Again, maybe you run into a potentially abusive landlord who tries to take advantage of you. Or you could experience ostracization from people within your community, your same culture, for whatever reason. You could experience bullying in school from your peers. This is fourth house as well. But especially things that connect to the mother, to the culture that you come from, to the home environment, the home base, like the physical home, right? So the environment, the physical environment that you grew up in somehow could have been abusive. And since the fourth house, this is the part where, I have to get more in detail here, because the fourth house rules happiness. And so when Nessus is sitting in the fourth house, there could be this feeling of being afraid to be happy because you don't know what that is going to bring you. You might even have a sense because of your experiences in life that you being happy is going to attract hatred, that it's going to attract abuse. You could be afraid to go after your happiness. You could have a lot of insecurities about your ability to be happy, to fill your own cup emotionally. There could be a lot of, especially for women, but even for men, there could be a lot of insecurities about, again, your ability to become a decent parent. There could be a lot of insecurities. Oh, speaking of abuse here, this could even be a situation where there is a lot of instability with respect to your home environment, the actual physical home. So, for instance, someone who may have experienced homelessness when they were young. And because of that, they grow up with this fear that they cannot secure a decent property, that they cannot have a roof over their heads. So that could happen. On the other hand, this could also be abuse happening because of your family of origin, because of your cultural background. It could be abuse happening because of your mother, because of the mother side of the family. It could also be because of vehicles, right? Somehow, I don't know, for instance, you ride your bike to school and other kids make fun of you because of your bike or something like that. So, yeah, things like that, or something connected to real estate. And then, fourth house, when it comes to impact of abuse, can show areas connected to the fourth house, which are the chest area, especially the lower chest. So, Cancer rules the breasts in a woman's horoscope, and the stomach. So these are primarily the areas ruled by Cancer. So if you have experienced abuse in these, and you have Nessus in the fourth house, is what I'm trying to say, then you might experience some kind of pain, some kind of psychosomatic issues connected to these areas of the body, like, heaven forbid, breast cancer or something, or some kind of breast issues, or speaking of breast issues, I know this is going to sound really roundabout, but I just thought about this right now. This might even show insecurities, especially for women, about the size of their breasts. Like people making fun of you because of the size of your breasts or something. I don't know. It's just a thought that I had. Could be. I mean, according to symbolisms, it is possible, but I can't say that I've seen this in any concrete examples. However, it could, like I said, so it could psychosomatically impact the chest area, the stomach area, because of any suffering you have experienced due to this abuse. If Nessus is going into the fifth house, so the fifth house connects to Leo, and it's about self-expression, it's about courtship, it's about love. Fifth house is the house that is most purely connected to love and the heart chakra, and especially in childhood, it shows like how loved you felt and how accepted you felt for being exactly yourself. This is the fifth house. Fifth house also represents dating, romance, so the courtship phase of romantic relationships before it becomes serious. Fifth house is also artistic expression, so anything that you love, really, like your hobbies, the way you express yourself artistically, creatively, how you express your individuality, your hobbies, right? It also represents college level education and above, up until master's included. It also represents teaching children. It represents, especially during school, it represents your peers when you are in school, or children in general, right? So basically, when Nessus is in the fifth house, you could see situations of a person being abused for being themselves. Like every time a person is just expressing who they truly are, their interests, their hobbies, they might experience abuse. Oftentimes, of course, the usual suspects are the primary caregivers, the parents, but it could also be teachers, could be people from university, could be your peers, or especially again when you're a child, could be your peers or children in general. You could experience abuse from other children when you are a child. I think it's less likely for this to be, well, actually, now that I think about it, it's a good thing I thought about this. Of course, fifth house rules your children also, and so this could also show, unfortunately, abuse from your children. Yeah, I mean, you hear of these cases every once in a while of someone who was murdered by, sorry, I should have said unalived, by their own children. I would not be surprised if you would see something like Nessus in their fifth house, sorry. Or again, if you're a teacher, this could be a pretty challenging position, I would say, because you could experience some very aggressive, unruly, pupils or students, however you want to call them. And of course, pay very close attention or be very careful when you are dating with this placement, because again, when it comes to the courtship phase, this would be a big suspect for something like date grape situations, being essayed by a romantic person, a romantic partner, or someone you're just going on dates with, but you're not very, very serious about it. Or, so it could be abuse through love somehow, one way or another. The way that it would impact you, of course, would be, I was going to say this is a particularly painful position, but I think all positions of Nessus can be really painful. This one, though, it does hit on a deeper level because the fifth house represents your deeper self. It represents, your true passion, your heart's desire. In a way, it's similar to the energy of the sun. So it would be similar to having Nessus in aspect to the sun, in the sense that you might feel a lack of confidence. You might feel really inhibited when it comes to being your true self, because you feel that if you express your true self, you're going to get abused or you're going to get hatred from other people. It might create a fear of educational figures, particularly connected to college level education or master's degree. So you might actually experience abuse from professors in some way. So it might create this aversion towards maybe academic environments because of this experience, or maybe cause you to doubt your intellectual abilities. And again, this is a very important thing that I should have mentioned, that fifth house also rules your ideas. So fifth house is actually very important when it comes to looking at a person's level of intelligence and type of intelligence and all that. So having Nessus in the fifth house again could very much impact your ability to trust your own judgment, to feel confident about your intelligence, right? About your ideas in particular, because mostly Nessus rules creativity. So it rules things like ideas, because ideas are things that you produce, basically. Similarly to children in a way, but of course with children it's a different biological process. You catch my drift. So this could happen, or again, you could experience abuse from people who work in fifth house related matters. So people who are in the educational field, people who are working with children, people who are in any kind of creative profession, especially connected to dramatic arts, for instance. So this could be, for instance, I don't know, you were trying to get your child enrolled at a particular kindergarten, and you might experience some nasty behavior from the people working at that kindergarten, or maybe other parents who are there, or something like that, right? So it could be in any area that is connected to fifth house activities. And could also be potential abuse from people working in fertilization issues, right? So people that are, again, in any way connected to the topic of children, whether it's, helping women with conception, or people who are in the educational field, or nannies. So watch out for any of these things. Fifth house, again, because it's connected to creativity, so you might experience issues with people when you pursue your hobbies.
Just to give an example, I don't know, maybe you want to go become a model. You know how many of these models ended up, hopefully nowadays it's gotten to be a healthier environment, but if you watch documentaries about what a lot of these popular models went through, a lot of them were essayed by photographers or by, I don't know what they're called, agents or whoever is basically holding most of the power in these areas, right? Like heads of agencies and whatnot. So, heaven forbid, but again, it doesn't hurt to be cautious if you have these placements, or again, if you have a child that has these placements and they want to get into a creative profession, keep an extra eye out for them. Yeah, this is pretty much what I can think about with respect to types of abuse that you might experience, how it would impact you physically because of the connection to anatomy would be the digestive issue, particularly the cardiovascular system, actually, especially, but to some extent also digestion. So the intestines, especially though the cardiovascular, so the heart and the rest of the blood vessels basically would be particularly vulnerable, susceptible to developing psychosomatic problems as a result of you experiencing abuse. Now, and again, I've said this with the rest of the houses as well. This could also be a situation where you experience abuse because of something connected to the fifth house. So, in a way, I've already touched upon that. But, like, for instance, maybe this would be a more far-fetched scenario, but you could actually experience hatred because of your children. I mean, this is an example I can think about right now, and I know it's really grim, and I definitely don't want to influence anyone's decision to have kids about this, because it's just a random example, but for instance, think of mothers of serial killers, right? I'm pretty sure that they experience some, I don't know if abuse, but people looking at them weird, at least, right? Or maybe the discrimination because their children did horrible things. So something like that is not excluded, considering the symbolisms of Nessus and the fifth house, respectively. Okay, this is what I can think about with the fifth house. If Nessus is in the sixth house, so sixth house is already about enemies, competition, everyday activities, your daily routine, your health overall, your approach to health. Sixth house, it's also pets, right? So Nessus in the sixth house can show, again, this is pretty much the strongest placement, at least when it comes to the Nessus perspective, because of course there are other configurations that could add to this becoming a problem. But when it comes to Nessus, this is definitely the strongest placement that could show abuse at the workplace, particularly for people who are employed as opposed to self-employed, because the sixth house is the house of employment, of a job. So this could, again, make you the target of coworkers, maybe other people at the workplace as well, but especially coworkers, because again, sixth house is about competition. It's about peers. So even in school, when you think about it, peers are other classmates. So this could also show that kind of abuse happening because of peers, because of classmates. Sixth house is also about, like I said, anything connected to the medical field, anything connected to pets. So you could experience abuse from people involved with the medical field. Be very careful with this placement, again, because you might experience something like malpraxis, heaven forbid, or doctors that are maybe worst case scenario even out to get you in some way, on purpose. Who knows? I mean, thankfully those are very rare cases, but they do happen. I had to take a short break. So back to the sixth house. So this could be abuse happening, like I said, from people in the medical field. It could be, again, veterinary doctors, could be anyone involved in animal care as well, animal groomers, could also be somehow people that are involved in your daily routine. So, for instance, if you have to take a certain bus to work every single day, maybe you are going to have an issue with the bus driver. The bus driver might be a jerk or something like that. So anything connected to sixth house environments. Now, this would be, of course, especially difficult for, I would say, and this is not to deter anyone from pursuing their ambitions or, heaven forbid, anything like that. But it is worth a heads up that if you get into the medical field as your profession, or into being a veterinary doctor as your profession, you might be at particularly high risk of receiving abusive behaviors from your peers, maybe superiors, etc. Of course, I always mention this as a disclaimer. As usual, you always have to check the entire horoscope to see a clearer picture of who, what, when, etc., right? But overall, these are the fields and the people that you would have to watch out for. Aside from that, sixth house is the digestive system, especially the intestines. So having issues with the intestines could be a result of trauma or of abuse that you might go through, as psychosomatic issues or anything else, right? Could be psychosomatic, or could be, heaven forbid, due to something direct, right? Aside from that, like, I was just thinking now that, of course, because of the sixth house connotation and connection to medical science, of course, this could be a situation of getting the wrong treatment, for instance, and suffering needlessly because of that. But anyway, let me not digress too much. That could happen. And then there's also, of course, the issue of you receiving potential abuse due to your medical issues, or due to, in a more roundabout way, I guess you could also say, due to your pets, but I don't know exactly. I mean, I can't think of a scenario of how that could happen. If I do come across situations like this, of course, I will let you know. But also, of course, feel free to share in the comment section if you can think of some issues you have gone through personally, or of people that you know where they were, I don't know, bullied because of their pets or something, or they received some kind of, they somehow were a victim of abuse because of their pets. But yeah, these are the general trends connected to the general energies connected to the sixth house. And if Nessus is falling into the seventh house, of course, this would be potentially problematic, because unfortunately, of course, the seventh house is the house of the spouse. It is the house of partnerships in general. So definitely potential abuse could come from your romantic partners, so your spouse especially, but could also be any long-term romantic partner, could be a business partner, could be any kind of partnership, really, with the seventh house. So this is the part where you have to be really careful with contracts in general. So if you sign any kind of a contract, especially that involves one-to-one relating or one-to-one activities or something, interactions, be very careful, because the contract in and of itself may turn out to be abusive, right? Because seventh house is about legal deals in general as well. So you have to be extra careful about anything you sign, because you might become a victim of something because of something you sign. Like, I can think of, those stories from older days. I don't know if they happen nowadays with old Hollywood actors, that they would sign a contract and then the studios would force them to tolerate all kinds of crap. But I remember seeing a documentary about Judy Garland, that basically the studios got her hooked on drugs. I think they were legal at the time. I don't remember what they were exactly, but I know that it basically led to her lifelong addiction and all kinds of health problems. But yeah, stuff like that. Okay, so be careful with contracts. Because of the Bavad Bhavam concept, which makes the seventh house the 10th from the 10th, there is also a connection to professional settings with the seventh house. So again, you also have to watch out for issues involving work, particularly if you work in some kind of partnership-based scenario. If you are a psychotherapist, for instance, I would definitely watch out, because psychotherapy is a profession that heavily relies on one-to-one interaction. So it does very much fall under the influence of the seventh house. So be really careful, stockish patients, be careful with stuff like that. Or, again, people suing you, or God knows what, stuff like that could happen, so watch out for it. So there is that, okay? So potential abuse could happen from these people. Of course, seventh house, like I said, because it's connected to contracts, you might actually have issues with people who do contracts for a living, like attorneys, like notaries, or people who are, involved in contract making on a regular basis. So be careful with that. And then there might be situations, again, on the other hand, where you might experience abuse because of the people you associate with, because of your partnerships, whether it's business oriented, whether it's your romantic partner. Aside from that, because of the seventh house connection to the genital organs, and also to some extent, basically everything that has to do with, genitalia to some extent is connected to the seventh and the eighth house. Seventh house is also lower back, pancreas, liver to some extent. So you might experience issues particularly connected to these anatomical regions because of traumas. Oh, and this is a big one, and I hate to say this, but especially according to Vedic astrology, the seventh house is the house that is most connected to intercourse, basically. So needless to say, because Nessus is connected to abuse, this could really translate into cases of SA. And of course, that would also make sense in terms of potential developing of issues connected to the genital regions, or connected to sexuality in general. But yeah, stuff like that could happen. So again, it doesn't hurt to get a heads up, especially and I've mentioned this in other videos, at least a big part of why I do these videos is for people who have kids and who have to take care of the next generations, because it's extremely important, if you have a child, that you should be aware of the potential risks that they're facing. It would really give you an advantage to understand their horoscopes, really. So yeah, closing parenthesis. Now, if you think about the eighth house, so Nessus in the eighth house. Now, what is the eighth house? Well, one of the first things that the eighth house governs is the family of origin of your spouse. So needless to say, again, this could show that the family of the spouse could be abusive towards you. Doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to be the entire family. Could be a member of their family. Yeah, and of course, the other planets and other influences surrounding these placements, the eighth house and Nessus, would show you more insight into how this abuse might take place. And eighth house is also about joint finances, especially the finances that you have together with your spouse, because again, the eighth is the second from the seventh house, which is the house of the spouse. So this also shows the savings or the money that you have together with your spouse. So this could also, in a roundabout way, lead to potential financial abuse. Or again, not so much, I would say, due to the spouse, but especially due to the family of the spouse. That's the main trigger here. Now, eighth house can also show anything connected to occultism, anything that is taboo, that is hidden, things like secret government projects, things like taboo organizations, I guess, if you believe in the Illuminati. Freemasons are actually a thing. So again, if you ever get an invite from these weird, fringe organizations, I would definitely turn them down if I had Nessus in the eighth house, because this one really makes you susceptible to suffering abuse because of any kind of secret societies, because of any kind of occultists as well. Some people put astrology in eighth house matters, but personally I wouldn't put it there unless the astrologer in question is up to no good. Astrology normally, now that I think about it, I don't know what house I would associate it with most. Maybe the fifth house, actually. But not the eighth house, because, some people like to shove it into the eighth house, but eighth house is more occultist. It's more psychic activity. I guess tarot could potentially be linked to the eighth house, but not even tarot. Not so much, really. This is more like things like conjuring entities or secret religious societies, stuff like that. And eighth house can also be anything that involves working in finance. So professions that have to deal with managing money, managing other people's money. So credit card companies, banks, insurance companies, pension plans, pension companies, if there are. I don't know, what do you call them, I guess. Are there pension companies? I don't know. In my country it's like insurance companies that, or banks that sell pension plans. But anything that would have to deal with, financial, strictly financial transactions, watch out for these, people that you deal with that are working in these professions, or contracts that you sign here, because they might try to take advantage of you, or again, might put you somehow either directly or indirectly into a situation where you suffer abuse. Oh, and also because the eighth house is connected to everything taboo, this could be, I don't know, like even people who are involved in, well, anything that is taboo really in your society would be eighth house in a roundabout way. So now I kind of, now that I say it, I guess I understand why some people put astrology in this category as well. But yeah, could be, again, tattoos, could be, again, secret societies, like I mentioned, anything that is just fringe, basically. So those could be people that you might suffer abuse from, or it could be people that, you know, somehow in an indirect way might lead you to an abusive situation. And then the eighth house is also, again, connected to the excretory system, the genital area as well. And so any issues that you have because of abuse might impact these anatomical parts, or your sexuality as well. That could be also the eighth house. And yeah, this is pretty much what I can say about eighth house and Nessus. And now, if Nessus is in the ninth house stands for foreign cultures, teachings of the father, and teachings of the guru. It stands for faraway lands, long distance or long-term travels. It stands for higher education, so this is mostly PhD level or above, extensive research, stuff like that. So yeah, all of these things that are connected to the ninth house could be areas that you experience some kind of abuse in. So I would definitely watch out, actually, with this placement. I would be careful. And again, I don't want to terrify anyone, especially if you have a strong urge to experience these things connected to the ninth house. But it doesn't hurt to be a little bit more cautious if you have this placement. So again, be careful about dealings you have with people from foreign lands. Be careful when you travel to foreign lands. Actually, I should have mentioned this with the eighth house, because the eighth house is also foreign lands, especially foreign lands where there's a different language being spoken than your mother tongue. So people with Nessus in the eighth house also have to be careful when traveling. But with ninth house, even more so, it's even more general about traveling. So again, here you can experience abuse from people who are involved in ninth house related professions. So this means travel agencies, tour guides, anyone involved in tourism and travel, basically airline companies, trains, when anything involved in traveling, like I said. It could also be connected to education, academia, academic figures, people in publishing, authors, people who are involved in journalism, for instance, especially, these journalists that are covering foreign affairs and stuff. So yeah, anything connected to that, these could be areas where you might experience abuse, either from these people that are, functioning. And of course, one big one could be your own father figure, or it could be father figures in general. But at its core, the ninth house connects to, it's similar basically to Nessus Jupiter contacts. You can also watch that in the part 1 video that I did for Nessus. But basically, this could be abusive religious figures, or people that you look up to as mentors, as gurus, as your teachers, right? So be careful with these placements, because these kinds of individuals could turn out to become abusive towards you. Aside from that, with respect to how the abuse could impact you physically, it could actually impact somehow, directly or indirectly, your legs, especially your calves, basically. And it could also impact anything to do with the ninth house. So your belief system could be severely impacted, your um your belief system, but I was thinking right now, even your ability to believe, right? So how strongly you believe in a higher power or not could also be impacted. Could be that, again, you could experience abuse from religious figures, like I said. So someone that you look up to, like a priest or something. Be really careful, again, especially if you are Catholic and you're hoping to, you have a kid with this position. I would not leave them alone with a priest. That's all I'm going to say. Um, or any other religion, because it's not just Catholicism that is full of all kinds of degenerates. But yeah, stuff like this could be more likely to happen to someone who has Nessus in the ninth house, okay? Same thing, unfortunately, with father figures. You never know. And again, mentors, again, teachers, like I said. Um, yeah, and again, in a roundabout way, this could show that you might experience abuse because of your ninth house area of life. So because of maybe your father's teachings, you end up getting in trouble or getting hatred from other people. Maybe because you follow a certain religious leader, you're getting hate from other people. Maybe because you follow a certain religion, you get hate from other people. Maybe because of your belief system, your philosophical views of life, you get hatred from other people, maybe even potential abuse. I have to say that with Nessus, it's not so much about just random hatred, like, I don't know, people trolling you or something. It's outright abuse a lot of the times, like nasty stuff, basically. Now, of course, and I always mention this, the extent or the depth or the type of abuse that might be suffered would have to be seen from more specific placements connected to this Nessus, right? Like what sign it's in, what nakshatra it's in, what other planets are aspecting it, what houses those planets rule, etc., right? And then, of course, last but not least, how this placement is activated through transits or through dashas. Yeah, okay. Now, having Nessus in the 10th house. Now, obviously, 10th house is the house of career, of social status. It is also the house of the father, especially the father's social status and professional life. It also rules everything in the work environment, how you get along with your peers, with your boss, especially with your boss. It can also rule governmental figures. So anyone that is put in a position of authority, that is the 10th house, especially in any hierarchical structure that you might find yourself in. So obviously, again, abuse could come from power, figures in positions of power, right? So some kind of power abuse happening. You could have a boss that is abusive, right? You could have coworkers to a lesser extent, but again, you would have to see what other influences are showing there. So there could be abuse happening at the workplace, definitely. 10th house, of course, is also about, so like I said, government. Again, you might be wrongfully, this would be a placement for people who are wrongfully accused by the state, for instance, or they're sent to prison for no reason or something like that. And especially since the 10th house has this connection to reputation, I would argue, but again, I would have to look at more examples connected to this, but I would argue this placement does have a high risk of some abuse becoming a scandal, somehow maybe tarnishing your reputation even when you are the victim. Again, you would have to look at other placements and how those impact the 10th house. And then the 10th house, when it comes to anatomical parts, it rules the bones in the body. It rules minerals in the body because of the connection to Saturn. Teeth, for instance, could also be an issue. So the kind of abuse that you suffer might impact your teeth, your bones, your minerals in your body. Like, I don't know, you might have a calcium deficiency or something because you're so stressed, even though I'm not sure that there is a direct link between those things. Or you might develop teeth grinding because of the stress at work or something like that. Aside from that, and by the way, of course, because of the 10th house connection to reputation, you could see this in a situation where it's not even like a person per se that is abusive, but it could be the status, right, that you have to uphold that is putting massive amounts of pressure on you. Like, for instance, this would apply to people who have high government positions or have some kind of position where they're very public or where there's a lot of responsibility on their shoulders. So that in and of itself can be perceived like a traumatic experience if it's very intense, basically, and there's no support, little to no support elsewhere in life, really. But yeah, this could happen. Now, if Nessus is falling into... oh, wait, another thing that I wanted to say. Because of the connection to status, to your father, etc. So this could also be a situation where, with Nessus in the 10th house, where you suffer abuse because of your reputation, because of your, let's say, because of the company that you work for, maybe because of your boss, maybe because of your father, right? Maybe because of your father's reputation, your father's work. So that could happen. Okay, when Nessus is in the 11th house. So the 11th house is the house of social networks, your wider social network, basically. Acquaintances, circle of acquaintances, as far as that goes, right? It shows your friends. It shows your elder siblings, if you have them, or elder sibling-like figures in your life. So again, this could be a situation. Oh, and it also rules large organizations, large scale events, because 11th house rules crowds. Okay, so anyone that is involved in professions connected to crowds, like concert organization, public speeches organization, TED Talks, stuff like that, that would all fall under the 11th house. I forgot to say this now about the 10th house. Of course, in a similar way, the 10th house is also people who work in government, work for the government, work for the state institution. So those kinds of people might end up becoming abusive towards you if you have Nessus in the 10th house. Okay, back to the 11th house. So with the 11th house, people from these categories that I mentioned earlier that are connected to the 11th house might turn abusive towards you. You could have had an elder sibling that was abusive, sorry. You could have experienced abuse at the hands of someone that you trusted as a friend. Obviously, horrible betrayal, but it does happen. You could have experienced abuse, or you could, again, even if it hasn't happened, could happen still, unfortunately. Watch out for activations through transits and dashas. So you could experience that from your friends, right? You could experience from elder siblings. You could, this is a situation where, again, I would have to see more horoscopes, but just based on intuition and based on what I know of the planetary symbolisms of astrology, the houses and what they connect to and all that, and what Nessus stands for, I would not be surprised if this would cause like public demonization of a person. You know, those situations where whether that person is guilty or not, they might just become a kind of scarlet letter character where people just demonize them. Like large groups of people hate them for just because, right? And again, I stress this because it's, you know, you wouldn't be able to tell just from one placement if the person is guilty or not. So they could be scapegoated, you know, with this placement. 11th house, because of the connection to Aquarius, again, it does rule. Now, according to somewhat traditional approaches to medical astrology, as far as I've seen, I see Aquarius being associated to the ankles, you know, to the calves to some extent. But based on empirical observation, based on planetary rulership, I also associate Aquarius to the nervous system and the bones as well, because Aquarius is co-ruled by Saturn in Vedic astrology. So due to whatever abuse you may experience in life, you might develop health issues connected to these before mentioned issues. And especially because of the rulership of Rahu on Aquarius, this could develop into neurological issues or psychological issues a lot more with Aquarius than with any other placement. Okay. And then again, on the other end of the spectrum, you could see situations where people receive abuse because of 11th house issues in their lives. So, because of all these things that the 11th house rules, like your elder siblings, your circle of friends, maybe public, I don't know, public appearances that you may have had, or people that you know who have had public appearances, anything connected to the 11th house could make you a target of abuse. Like, for instance, I don't know, people find out that you're friends with Andrew Tate, right? Or Donald Trump, or some very polarizing figure like that. I'm not putting them in the same category. I think Tate is a million times worse, but just giving some examples, right? Or Teal Swan, or I don't know, just anyone who is very much controversial, let's say, polarizing, right? That people have very strong feelings about, and you might get random hatred because of that, okay? That's an example. Now, 12th house, last but not least, Nessus in the 12th house could show basically abuse coming from 12th house related issues and people. So 12th house connects to very far away lands. This is the farthest away from you as it can get, because it is 12 places away from the ascendant, the place of your birth. So this most likely shows people who are either at the other end of the continent from you, or they are in totally different, right? Like the other end of the planet, a different continent, etc. So people who are very, very different from you. And then the 12th house can also rule anything connected to spirituality, like religious leaders, especially places of isolation and people involved in places of isolation. So hospitals, churches, ashrams, temples, mosques, so places of religious worship, closed places basically, but especially places that involve some kind of isolation for long periods of time from the rest of the world. So ashrams maybe, or convents, right? I don't know. I guess you need to watch out for nuns, although I actually have heard of cases of people who were abused by Tibetan monks. Well, all kinds of religious organizations, but Tibetan monks, would be particularly illustrated by the 12th house, unless, of course, you live in Tibet, in which case that's the first house for you. But if you're from a Western country and you're going to Tibet, that's the 12th house territory for you. So, yeah, be careful. Or Buddhist monks, basically. I said Tibetan, but I meant Buddhist. Yeah, they're not just in Tibet, they're in a lot of countries. But yeah, basically, there could be abuse happening from religious not just leaders, religious figures. So, or people within the congregation, because again, the 12th house, the houses in general, they show the location. Okay, so it could happen at an ashram, or some kind of place where you're going in isolation, at a hospital, at a psychiatric hospital, at a recovery center, at rehab or something. So places like that could turn abusive, or you could experience some kind of abuse in those areas. Of course, prisons could be correctional facilities and whatnot. And then the 12th house is anything involving hidden affairs. There used to be this website, and the only reason I know about it is because I was scandalized when I saw it being discussed on YouTube. I understood that it was taken down, but there was a website, I don't know until when it operated. It was called, I think, Allison, that basically was a dating app exclusively for married people, which is like the most scandalous shit ever. Anyway, but I understood it was taken down, and yeah, that Allison sort of platform, that would be symbolized by the 12th house, because 12th house is hidden affair. So people who tend to have affairs that are kept secret and whatnot, that those people tend to have very prominent 12th house placements. So you might run into abusive situations with someone that you have an affair with, okay? It is, I'm just throwing it out there because, it's an extra reason to not get involved in affairs. But another thing, of course, could be people who are involved in sleep issues like meditation, sleep. So because the 12th house has this connection to the subconscious or the unconscious, right? It really has a connection to experts, for instance, that work on the subconscious, work on understanding the brain, psychiatrists, stuff like this, or people who are like sleep doctors, right? Because 12th house is connected to sleep. By the way, this is again a thought, so I would have to do research on it because I haven't seen cases like this. But I wouldn't be surprised if Nessus in the 12th house would show people who have really bad nightmares, like night terrors and whatnot, But again, I would be curious, and I'm sure that you would have to see other influences from other parts of the horoscope to reinforce this. Yes, but aside from night terrors, like I said, so you could experience, I don't know, like let's say you go to a clinic to get sleep apnea tests or something, and you might experience some kind of abuse from a nurse or something like that, right? So this sort of stuff can happen connected to 12th house. So hospitals, like I said, prisons, any place of isolation, those people who set up, towers on mountains or something. If you take a job like that, you could end up having an abusive boss or something, right? And then the 12th house rules feet anatomically. So any kind of abuse you would suffer might impact your feet, especially. And then 12th house, like I said, because of its connection to faraway lands, could also show you might experience abuse in faraway lands, or you might experience abuse at the hands of someone coming from a very different culture, from a very faraway land. So with the 12th house, I wouldn't say so much that this is about someone who comes from a different culture but is born in the same country. This is more people who actually come from a different culture. Like they were born there, they live there, and yeah, you have some kind of dealings with them. So it is a good idea to watch out. And of course, like I said, religious leaders, okay? Okay, this is what I had to say about Nessus in the houses. I wasn't even planning on doing this when I finished the first part of the video, but now that I remembered it, I figured, why not? Let me cover everything. All the main patterns that I picked up during my research on Nessus and other asteroids. Okay, and now, finally, moving on to the second and final part of this video, which are some of the examples that I wanted to go over. So, continuing with the next part, which is the examples, I just realized as I was preparing to record this, because it is the next day after the first part of this video, I realized that I forgot to mention that when it comes to house influences of Nessus, this could also be applied to connections between Nessus and house rulers. So, for instance, that means that if your ascendant is in Aries, Mars is ruling the ascendant, and if Mars is conjunct Nessus, or it's in some kind of an aspect with Nessus, like I said, mostly conjunction, opposition, or square, that would also mean that Nessus is impacting your first house, even though it's not seated directly in the first house. Like, even if it's, let's say, I don't know, in Leo in your fifth house, that would somehow mean that it's impacting both the fifth and the first house. But, of course, the main impact is on the house that it's sitting in. So, just thought I would mention this. And, of course, as usual, I always mention this. Feel free to share in the comment section anything you can think about that, relates to your own experiences or experiences of people that you know very well, because it would really help my research, and it would also help other people who are reading the comment section to, see that others have similar experiences, or maybe don't have similar experiences. Of course, feel free to share anything you think is relevant. That being said, okay, let me start with the examples. I have quite a few of them, so it's going to be difficult to know what to start with. I'm just going to take them in order, basically. So, one example that I took was Corey Feldman. he's an actor who got popular in the 80s, as far as I understood. I have seen him in some films, but I'm not super familiar with his work because he was, again, like I said, mostly popular in the 80s. I was born in 89, so he wasn't really that popular when I was growing up. Um, and he became well known, as far as I have seen, because he was very public about SA that he suffered together with his friend and co-star, another Corey, that was whose name was Corey Haim, who tragically took his own life. And so Corey Feldman has been public for a long time about experiencing cases of SA from older men in Hollywood when he and his other friend also named Corey, were young, basically, when they were minors. So yeah, cases of PEDO, you know. I'm trying to not get flagged or something on YouTube for talking about sensitive topics, but you know what I'm talking about, right? So he's open about those things. And so I thought it would be interesting to look at his horoscope. His time of birth is known. So if you look at his horoscope, he has Nessus conjunct Saturn in Taurus, in Mrigashira Nakshatra. I should have mentioned this, I feel, from the beginning. I did not really extensively look into nakshatras, but I would argue, again, using the general principles of astrology, the nakshatras are very much relevant. All right, the lords of the nakshatras, I would say, would probably be just as relevant as the lords of the sign that this Nessus is sitting in. So here it's sitting in Mrigashira, which is ruled by Mars, and then it's in Taurus, and it's also conjunct Saturn, and it's in the 11th house. Okay, so 11th house is kind of the second of the 10th house, the second from the 10th house. So due to the Bhavat Bhavam principle, it shows gains from career, it shows social networks. It does tend to show older sibling figures. Now, I haven't looked extensively into more details about the people I don't think he named actual abusers, but I'm sure that him being a younger person, that these were people who presented as his friends, right? So in a roundabout way, just looking at it from this perspective, it makes sense that his Nessus is in the 11th house. It also makes sense when you think about the fact that the 11th house is the gains from career. So somehow this abuse would have happened as a result of him gaining in his career, as a result of him succeeding in his career. But a very important factor, of course, that I don't want to sound like I'm walking around the elephant in the living room, but of course the conjunction to Saturn is extremely relevant. Not just because Saturn shows older people, significantly older people. I've mentioned this in other videos. Saturn tends to show an age gap of at least 7 years, and it's usually older people, or at least mature people. Aside from that, Saturn also rules, authority figures to some extent. Not so much, or not in the same way that the sun represents authority figures. So Saturn rules like bosses, people that have some kind of power over you, some kind of authority through contracts, right? Like work contracts, especially. And then Saturn is ruling his 7th and ruling his 8th houses. Now, the connection to the 8th house would make a lot of sense because this was all very secret, very, very hidden. Could have, of course, in his context, shown some kind of a, maybe even potentially a cult-like setting or some kind of a systemic hidden organization problem. 7th house would, again, also point to things like business partnerships. Well, 7th house is partnerships in general. Could also could also hint to potential abuse coming from romantic partners. Now, I don't know what his history was. I just know these are the basic facts that I remember about him. I haven't done in-depth research. If any of you are inclined and you have the time, feel free to do so, please, and share the results with everyone in the comment section. About any details that you may find out about his situation or people who abused him or anything that would somehow tie into his Nessus situation. That would be helpful. But this is what I see so far. And of course, last but not least, the fact that Nessus is in Mrigashira is showing potential abuse from male figures, right? Because it's ruled by Mars. Also falling in Taurus, there, Mars and Venus, both of them kind of being around this Nessus, would be expressing the sexual tone of the abuse. Oh, together with, of course, the seventh house, as I mentioned in the general description, the seventh house, especially according to traditional Vedic astrology, rules the actual sexual act. I have not hinted, I've actually touched upon this a lot, no pun intended, in a video that I did in the membership section, where I talked about, I don't even remember what it was called, but I will be linking it, I think, in the video description if I remember, just in case anyone wants to see it. About the seventh house is all I'm going to say. But either way, seventh house, according to traditional Vedic interpretations, is the house of sexual activities, the actual sexual act. So the Lord of the Seventh being connected to Nessus would pretty much explain the nature of the abuse that he went through. Both the seventh and the eighth, actually, in a roundabout way, sort of. The eighth more in a roundabout way, deal with sexuality. All right, but the eighth also has that connotation of secret, hidden, taboo, occult, secret societies, things that are hidden from view, and all that stuff. Okay, moving on to the next example, his friend Corey Haim. Now, it's more difficult with this one because his time of birth was unknown, but I wanted to look at it out of curiosity, and the main thing that I notice again is that Nessus is conjunct Saturn. To be fair, they are close in age. I think both of them were born in 1971. Let me see. Yeah. They were born in, wait, hold on a second. Yes, so one of them was born, so Feldman was born in July and Corey Haim was born in December. So I guess everybody born in that year with Saturn conjunct Nessus would have had high chances of experiencing some kind of SA. Maybe this, at least partially explains why those generations, many of them came out to talk about the fact that they were treated in abusive ways by Hollywood. Child actors, I mean, especially. Although, as far as I understood, in Hollywood it has been a, systemic problem from the beginning. I remember seeing videos that talked about Shirley Temple and how she spoke of her experiences with Hollywood executives trying to essay her and all that. Anyway, so there is the Nessus-Saturn conjunction, and then there's Nessus opposite Jupiter, opposite Mercury. Okay, so I think Jupiter especially would have made this even worse. And again, I don't remember the full story, so I don't remember many details about him. Except that what Feldman said was that obviously it hit him very hard, that it was somehow more intense in his case, which is also reflected by his horoscope, even without knowing the time of birth. I also think that Jupiter and Mercury and Eros being conjunct in Scorpio would have made him even more of a target. I did say that I was going to do a video at some point about Eros in a man's horoscope, and I will be doing that at some point, because it's similar to what women go through, being sexualized, but in a different way. So, like, in the sense that you would have to look at different configurations. I wouldn't be surprised if this Eros being conjunct to his natal planets, one of which is Jupiter, which for a man connects to his, masculine energy, would have made him more of a target. Would have made him even more appealing to, PEDOs. And then Scorpio in and of itself is all about power plays. And, I just feel like this opposition here to Nessus would have explained why the abuse would have been particularly damaging to him on the one hand. But especially with Jupiter also ruling belief system, ruling mentors, gurus, people that you look up to, and potentially father figures, especially in a young person's life. I don't know what his situation is. Like I said, I haven't looked into his entire life story, but I wouldn't be surprised, especially becoming a child actor back in those days, and like many child actors even in today's world, that he didn't have maybe a father in the picture. I wouldn't be surprised, or the father was not very close, because that would have left him even more vulnerable, even more likely to be exploited by male figures who would have presented themselves as paternal figures to him, and gurus and people who just wanted to help him. So, yeah, I can imagine how this would have turned into something really, really damaging. And yeah, I think this is more than enough to, understand why he was extremely affected. And also, another thing that is worth mentioning is that his Saturn is in Kritika Nakshatra, which is ruled by the sun. So there is that further emphasis on the father archetype being involved here. The father archetype, a paternal figure, and also this power play, right? Because the sun represents authority figures. Okay. I wouldn't be surprised if, in his case, it may have started before Hollywood or something. That would also make sense with respect to why he was so emotionally hurt that he ended up taking his own life. But yeah. And also, Mercury would have shown maybe younger people as well, would have shown peers as well. People who are also kind of androgynous, Mercury. Yeah, I've said this in another video, but I haven't really done extensive research on it. But according to some astrologers, Saturn and Mercury kind of rules homosexuality. I mean, that's what some people have said, because Mercury and Saturn represent these energies that are not strongly masculine or strongly feminine, unlike other planets, right? So they're more like in the middle. Especially Mercury has this energy of androgyny about it, but even Saturn. So anyway, I'm just gonna leave it at this. I feel like it's more than enough to explain. It would have been, of course, more interesting to see what houses these planets actually fell in, because I don't have the time though. So yeah, I'm not gonna look into that. Then there's another really tragic case that I wanted to talk about. I think I also mentioned him in the first part of the video. David Reimer, or Reimer, I don't know how to pronounce it exactly. This was a case that, again, I heard about from YouTube, of this boy in the I think the 70s or the 80s, who, yeah, 70s I think, because he was born in 1965, who was subjected to basically very unethical experimentation at the hands of his doctor at the time, who, hid his true intentions, which were to turn him into an experiment, gain the trust of his mother, and with the mother's blessing, because David had experienced a botched circumcision, basically convinced his mother that it would be best to just remove the genital organs and raise him as a girl, that this would work and this would lead to a happier life, since he was a twin. He had a twin brother as well, and I think both of them were subjected to all kinds of weird experiments. It came out later, actually, once David was an adult, because I remember him talking in this documentary, and sadly David also took his own life. Really, really messed up when you think about it. But I remember him saying that both of them, that they were basically SA'd as well, or they were treated inappropriately, that there were inappropriate undertones with respect to how this doctor treated them. And also the doctor was never called to justice, because I forgot what the reasons were. Something about maybe statute of limitations, or something like too much time had passed after they actually came forward to talk about how inappropriate and abusive he was. But the bottom line is, he was subjected to this really abusive procedure, I guess. And if you look at his horoscope, I don't remember. Oh, yeah, I don't think I wrote it here, but yes, his time of birth was unknown as well. So his time of birth was unknown, so I can't go by houses. But Nessus is conjunct Rahu, and it is falling in Taurus in Rohini Nakshatra. Now, Rohini is ruled by the moon, and the moon in his horoscope is conjunct Jupiter. So there is a connection here again to a guru, a parental figure, because of that Jupiter influence, and especially someone who's highly educated. As far as I understood, this person was someone, the doctor in question, he was someone with a high reputation, someone who people esteemed, held in high esteem and respected. So it makes sense from his horoscope in the sense that it explains the kind of abuse that he experienced. And it also makes sense that it falls in conjunction with Rahu, since Rahu shows, and this is the part where I don't like saying this, but Rahu does show things that you are meant to experience in this lifetime. The reason I don't want to say it is because somehow it implies a certain amount of fatalism, which I don't agree with personally, all right? But some astrologers are fully into it. I mean, I've heard Kapil Raj, for instance, not pointing fingers, but I remember hearing him say in a video that life is like a movie that you come here to watch, and you will technically, like, there's a higher part of you that already knows everything that's going to happen. But that doesn't make any sense to me because, yeah, I don't agree with that. And it's also not what I have noticed. It doesn't make any sense to me because why would we be here if everything were just a movie, right? I really believe that we are here to learn, and not everything is set in stone. Now, with Nessus being conjunct Rahu, maybe there was some amount of, some degree of inevitability with respect to him suffering some amount of abuse, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it should have been this thing very specifically, right? I think that if his mother had been well informed, I mean, obviously in today's world, I don't think that sort of thing would have happened. Hopefully, I really hope so. Although with this gender identity crap, you don't really know what to think. So maybe there are parents who are insane enough to do this to their children. But I think for the most part, there are much lower chances of this happening because there is a higher degree of transparency, first of all, about everyone and, doctors and their reputations and patients and whatnot. There are public reviews. There's, information travels a lot faster and whatnot. So I don't think it would have happened. But unfortunately, this was the case for him. And I also think that, again, the mother being there, the moon, that shows his mother's involvement somehow. Even though, of course, the mother later ended up regretting it. And she said that on camera, but you have to wonder if on some level she thought, oh, I always wanted a daughter and maybe this would work, So you have to wonder about the extent of her involvement in his extreme suffering, really. But yeah, this is what I wanted to say basically about David Reimer. I was also looking at the rest of the aspects, and if you look at his horoscope, you also see that he has Sun squared Nessus, so that would also show further involvement of a father figure, of an authority figure with the Sun. That would make sense. And also, let's not forget, looking at it from the other side of the coin, which would be Nessus with all of its configurations attached to it, show how the person was impacted. So Jupiter being impacted, Moon being impacted. Jupiter would have shown his faith maybe in a higher power being crushed, his faith in life being crushed. Moon being involved would have shown extreme damage of, his way of thinking, his basic personality, maybe also his ability to attach emotionally, maybe also severely damage his view of his mother. The Sun, again, would have shown a damaged view, again, of his confidence, of his self-esteem. And if I remember correctly, he actually talked about all these things in the video. He did say that he really felt like he never fit in, that, he tried to be a girl, but it just never felt right for him, etc. So, yeah. Anyway, this is one example. And moving on to another example I wanted to look at, which again is really not a happy example, but then none of these are particularly happy examples because I had to find things that were, really relevant for the topic of abuse. And this is Fiona Apple, a singer that I really like, and one of my favorite all-time singers, actually. She is a person who has been public about having been, essayed in a horrible way, as in R word, when she was in her early teens, by a random stranger that she never actually identified or knew, whatever, and how it severely impacted her life and her art later on. And if you look at her horoscope, she has Nessus in conjunction with Mars, in conjunction with Jupiter, falling in the ninth house because her time of birth is known. And it's also opposite Eros, which I think is relevant as well because Eros also has a sexual connotation. And obviously, there is this impact of, first of all, the sexuality aspect because of the Mars, and it's also falling in, as far as I can tell, Ardra. Let me just check. Yes, so her entire cluster of Jupiter, Mars, and Nessus are falling in Ardra Nakshatra, which furthermore has a connotation of extreme abuse, especially things like SA, because of the legend associated to it. I have touched upon it, and I kept saying this for a long time that I wanted to do. Well, I still have to continue that series with nakshatras, because I stopped. I have to do Saturn rule nakshatras next. I still have to do Saturn, Rahu, and Ketu rule nakshatras. At some point, I will. I wanted to do a video, especially on Ardra, particularly because it is a very complex and very intense nakshatra. And I have mentioned this in other videos, especially the ones where I talked about, I'm pretty sure, childhood abuse or bad childhoods, that it is a nakshatra that shows up often when it comes to really rough experiences in life, because there's this connotation between Ardra and a lot of trauma, a lot of grief, and also the toughening up that happens after that, sort of like becoming tough like a diamond. It's also associated to a diamond as a nakshatra. But anyway, so I think this whole thing does really explain the kind of experience that she went through. The fact that it falls in the ninth house and with Jupiter, it shows that somehow it definitely shaped her entire worldview. It could maybe in a roundabout way show that it changed her views of maybe her father, because again, the ninth house is associated to teachings of the father, maybe, but I wouldn't know, obviously, to which extent that is the case. However, it definitely may have impacted her ability to trust, obviously, male figures, and again, this falls back into how it impacted her worldview and her belief systems. I do remember seeing interviews with her where she actually said that it was something that impacted her a lot, but it also, in a weird way, helped her in her art, basically, in her creating music. And now that I think about it, oh my god, it actually makes a lot of sense, considering her her houses, because she has second house in Scorpio and third house in Sagittarius, and Jupiter and Mars rule these two houses, conjunct Nessus. So, and these two houses are the most connected to music. So third house would be especially songwriting, which she does, and, playing piano, which she does. So playing instruments would be third house. Jupiter also rules classical music, right? And the ability to read and write classical music. And second house would be more of the singing, the actual voice. So, and she is a singer who writes her own music. So in a silver lining situation, right, in a silver lining perspective, it's actually something that actually helped her create art, at least. Yeah, there's also in her horoscope, she also has Pluto square Mars, which, even according to traditional tropical astrology, tends to make a person more likely to experience things like SA. But it is something that I would have to do more research into, because I haven't more research on. Moving on to another example, and this is one of the cases that even got me thinking about this topic and the next topic that I want to cover, about Nessus, because I did say that I wanted to do another topic, and I don't want to say anything about that because it's, meant to be a surprise. That's more of a slightly more lighthearted topic because it's also connected to abuse, but it's more of a positive twist. This case, however, is one that I just randomly came across because some, piece of news, some article showed up in my feed on social media. And it was an article about this woman called Franca Viola. And apparently, she was the woman who became the turning point for the Italian legal system because I didn't even know this was a thing, and it really horrified me when I found out about it, that apparently in Italy before her case, it was the law that if a man R-word a woman, that he was obligated legally to marry her. So, and she had basically no say in the matter, which is disgusting and primitive. And what can I say? Like, part of me was very horrified, but the other part was like, I'm not entirely surprised, especially since Italy is a Latin country, and I think a lot of people outside, especially of Europe, don't know how misogynistic Latin cultures are. Or maybe they do, I don't know, because I'm sure it's the same in South America. But Italy is, the very close to the epicenter of misogyny because they are the direct descendants of the Roman Empire. But anyway, enough about ranting on other people's cultures and all that. She apparently was a case who was a victim of being not just R-word, but it was, as far as I read, a really particularly vile form of abuse where apparently she was propositioned, which is a case that I have heard several stories of coming from Italy. She was propositioned by this guy who had ties to the mafia, and she turned him down, and the guy couldn't take a refusal, and so he and another guy kidnapped her and R-word her and tortured her for days, as far as I understood, knowing that basically the law would be that she would be forced to marry him, even though she was infatuated with another boy and, wanted to marry that boy, basically. So it was this really horrible thing, but she actually had the courage to take him to court and to fight for her right to not marry him, basically. And not only that, but actually ended up having him convicted. And after he got out of prison, I think he was in prison, I don't know, for a few years. I don't remember, but it was, I think, under a decade anyway. Not enough, if you ask me, for something like of this nature. But how can you handle? I mean, what can you say more except misogyny, whatever. But after he got out of prison, he was basically offed by, as far as I understood, the villagers or some people who knew of her case, who supported her, or maybe he was offed by, I don't know, members of his gang that he owed money to. The bottom line is, after this woman and her case, her trial, the law in Italy changed, and women were no longer forced to marry their assailants, and it became punishable by law, So basically, as far as I understood, before this case, basically perpetrators had the option to escape prison sentence or to escape punishment for R-words by marrying the woman, which is such primitive crap. But again, so she overturned that, and she actually ended up marrying the man that she always wanted to marry, and they had children and lived happily ever after at the end. So she was a very fascinating case, and she was the one that really got me thinking about looking into her Nessus, and particularly from the perspective of this other video that I'm going to talk about. Okay, I won't get into it now because it's supposed to be a surprise. Either way, if you look at it, so her time of birth, again, is unknown, obviously, because she was born a long time ago. But again, we have this Nessus conjunct Rahu situation that was also present in the David Reimer case, or Reimer case, which shows that somehow Nessus or abuse, right, was going to be part of what she was meant to experience in this lifetime with that Rahu connection there, and somehow shaped her life trajectory either way, you know. And then there is, so Nessus is falling in 50 degrees, which, as far as I remember, is Ashwini. Let me see. No, it's not Ashwini, it's Bharani. Oh, that makes it even more relevant, actually. So Bharani Nakshatra is very much connected to the justice system. So this makes a lot of sense now that I think about it. It's really crazy. And also Rahu is in Kritika. It's in Kritika Nakshatra. So that would have, again, meant this very strong sense of justice, very strong sense of pride that was connected to this Rahu Nessus conjunction, right? So her pride was activated, her sense of justice was activated, and it's really relevant, really. I mean, for someone with Bharani involvement here, this makes a lot of sense because Bharani, I have talked about it in a video where I talked about Venus ruled nakshatras, has actually, again, kind of a history of SA associated to the legend. Not SA actually, so it's not as bad as Ardra, but there's a history of incest. Basically, the story of Bharani is connected to a man who was inappropriately propositioned by his sister, and he turned her down because of a strong sense of morality. So Bharani has this connection, number one, to morality, number two, to feminine issues. So it actually rules the genital area of a woman, like the female genital, the vagina, basically. And it also connects to pregnancy. And so it's very, according to a lot of Vedic astrologers, it's even seen as the most feminine nakshatra. If you look at it from a universal energy perspective, right? It's very female oriented. And it's also very importantly connected to vengeance. Because of its connection to justice, Bharanis are the types that, you know, do not let go of grudges, and they're very vengeful. I mean, I should imagine this would be even more so the case for her being Italian. I think she was from Sicily, but I'm not 100% sure. And then there's also the opposition from Saturn. There's not opposition. There's the square from Saturn, Pluto. There's the square from Venus and Eros and Lilith. All right. And so I think these further emphasize the fact, especially with Venus in being involved here with the square, would have emphasized the nature of the abuse and being smexual. I mean, because Venus is one of those smexuality connected planets, especially for a woman. And there's also a trine from Mars in Leo, so maybe that was also relevant, especially with Mars being in Purva Falguni. I have talked about Purva Falguni. I've also, again, talked about Purva Falguni extensively in the video that I did on Venus ruled nakshatras, and how especially women, but even men with strong placements in this nakshatra, tend to be more prone than average to receiving inappropriate attention from others, because it's a very sensuous sort of energy that is very alluring to a lot of people. But even if you don't look at it from the Purva Falguni aspect, just the Mars energy there, again, would have shown violence, physical violence being part of what this Nessus was going to attract in her life. And Saturn, that was the part that I wanted to talk about. So Saturn, Pluto rules power struggles, right? So some kind of power issue being involved. And Saturn also shows antiquated, like Saturn rules tradition, basically. So somehow being a victim of also the legal system, because Saturn rules law, laws and regulations. So somehow it makes perfect sense that she was a victim of these things, and also that she would want to basically attack the system. But I'm going to talk about her again in this other video that I'm going to do on Nessus. Yeah. Because I have some other topic. Like I said, it's a surprise. Then another famous person that I wanted to look at was Franz Kafka. I have not read any of his books. I know that he was very successful as an author. He had a book called The Trial and Metamorphosis. I think he falls under some, what is it, like a neoclassical trend or whatever it's called. A lot of people think that his novels are very weird. As far as I read and heard, I have not read anything by him, but the reason I wanted to do his horoscope was because actually one YouTuber that I occasionally listen to, I think her name is Dr. Anna, but I don't remember like the full name of her channel. She is a licensed psychotherapist, as far as I understood, someone who has a PhD in psychotherapy and in psychology, sorry. And she actually had a video, I don't know, maybe like 2 months ago or so, where she talked about Franz Kafka and the abuse that he experienced, described by a letter that he wrote himself to his father. So, and he was, pretty specific about things that he experienced. And I wanted to really see, his horoscope to see what's the situation there, because he's someone who, again, was just open about experiencing abuse. And also how this is another relevant part. He talked about how it impacted his ability to form healthy relationships, how he never felt like he was good enough to have love in his life. And I don't know what his, like, again, I haven't looked into the full story, but as far as I understood, he never married. I'm not sure, like, did he marry or not? But I understood from the letters that the letter he wrote to his father, that there was at least one significant romantic partner that he missed out on, basically, because he just felt very inadequate and felt like, even if he did pursue a relationship, that she would leave him, that he wasn't good enough, basically. So if, again, you look at his horoscope, Nessus is in 7 degrees Capricorn, falling in his 7th house, which is the house of marriage, of course. So, and right off the bat, the fact that the abuse impacted his ability to form relationships is very much expressed here. And then falling in 7 degrees Capricorn, let me double check this. Yeah, it's in Uttarashadha. So Uttarashadha is a nakshatra that is ruled by the sun. All right, so there is the sun aspect here, the sun energy of the father archetype. The sun is one of the strongest indicators of the father archetype, what kind of relationship you had with your father. And in his horoscope, the sun is conjunct the moon and conjunct Jupiter. This is really fascinating, especially considering, now that I think about it, because I am remembering things that I heard in that video, where he was actually making it pretty clear in the things that he wrote that he also was resentful in a way towards his mother, because the mother was the typical type, which, you would have seen in a traditional patriarchal system, of the woman who never defended her kids. And, so she was basically standing there seeing that his father was being abusive towards him, verbally or emotionally or in any way. And she never interfered, really, never really corrected him in any way, never even tried, basically, to correct his father. And so it makes sense that in his horoscope he would have moon conjunct sun conjunct Jupiter, because this would have impacted both, the perception of both his parents, or that somehow he perceived his parents as united against him and in being abusive towards him. And the Jupiter there, again, would have shown the impact on his life view, his entire perception of reality, his teachings, and also his writing, because this is an author, let's not forget that. By the way, the Sun Moon Jupiter conjunction in general would be very relevant for an author, would definitely make for a prolific creative mind, And then let me see if there's other aspects. Yeah, Nessus is also opposite Rahu. You could also see that as a potential well, I would have to do more research, so I'm going to hold that thought, because I would have to do more research on how relevant the square to Rahu is. But it is also trined by that cluster of planets that he has in Taurus. So Mars, Pluto, Saturn, Venus, Mercury. So definitely shows that the abuse he suffered was extremely impactful. All right. Okay. This is what I wanted to say. Oh, especially since, well, very impactful. Basically, almost all of his houses. No, all of his houses were touched by Nessus, basically. including the ones that would rule publishing and writing and all that stuff. So it makes a lot of sense that he also wrote about it, right? Or that it directly or indirectly inspired his art. Another example that I looked at out of sheer curiosity, just because she was someone that gave me a vibe of someone who had a rough life. And according to her horoscope, it is true. And this is Halsey, a singer. I mean, I'm sure many of you know her. She's a very popular singer, actually. And she has Nessus in the first house, conjunct a lot of planets, conjunct Rahu, Jupiter, Venus, and Mercury, and Juno. That's another. I added the asteroid because I'm doing some research onto it, but I'm not ready to reveal any particularly new insights on it other than the ones that you might find online. But I think in her case, and it's opposite Lilith as well, so yeah, I'm gonna shut up now. But basically, it would be a situation where the abuse is, or some kind of abuse that she experienced, became a part of her life. She really attracted my attention because she was, I mean, I never heard her say that she was a victim of abuse, or maybe she was, I don't know. Again, please feel free to comment in the comment section if you know anything about it. I do think she did mention something about having been in inappropriate relationships, but this is what really got me to look at her chart. That I was watching, I came across actually a short, like one of those YouTube shorts that pops up in your feed, where she was talking to an interviewer and said something about how she was sleeping with men that she didn't even like or something like that. And I thought to myself, holy shit, that is textbook behavior for a woman who was abused from early childhood, essayed, whatnot. Because, I mean, I'm sorry, but sane women don't do that kind of thing, okay? Like, women who are healthy, who have a healthy self-esteem and whatnot, would not do that kind of thing. That would definitely make sense for someone who, I don't know, feels like she needs to please people at the expense of herself, or that's her somehow her sense of self-worth is connected to how sexually active she is or something. And again, I don't remember her saying anything about this. Please, like I said, share in the comment section if you know anything. But her horoscope with these positions would make a lot of sense from the perspective of someone who actually has experienced significant abuse in her life. And coming also with Venus, this could have been really, again, affecting her self-esteem, even though Venus is pretty healthy here. It's in Libra. But again, Nessus is about impacting the things that it touches through the abuse suffered. So the impact on Venus would show self-esteem. And notice again that Jupiter is ruling her third house. And Jupiter is also conjunct Nessus, okay? So again, for her being a singer-songwriter, this would make a lot of sense because she would be able to use the abusive experiences she went through and turn them into art, right? Or inspiration. And she also has Mars conjunct Moon opposite Nessus as well, and opposite this entire cluster of planets that she has in the first house, which would again make Nessus extremely impactful, sorry, in her life, together with sorry, I was gonna say it's also impacting Saturn, not together with. So it's because Saturn is also trining her ascendant. So basically, the only planet that I see that is not aspected by Nessus is her sun, which would make sense because that would still leave her confidence relatively unscathed, right? So sun is confident and yeah, vitality and willpower and all that. So at least she had that part of her that was relatively untouched as far as I see from abuse. Also potentially leading me to think that she has a pretty healthy relationship with her father. Another very relevant example that also saddened me, but also made me feel, well, shit, this makes sense, is Princess Diana. So, Princess of Wales. Her time of birth, again, was known. At least there was a given official time of birth. So, I'm going to take it. I'm going to assume that this was the correct one. And she has Nessus conjunct Venus in the 7th house. And obviously, considering the crap that came out about how Prince Charles, now King Charles, treated her throughout their marriage. It makes a lot of sense. And now that I look at it, not only does it make a lot of sense from the Charles perspective, but it makes sense from the Camilla perspective as well, because Venus is ruling the 12th house, the house of hidden love affairs, okay? And one of the biggest pains of her life in her relationship was the fact that her husband maintained a relationship with Camilla Parker throughout the time when they were married. All right, I remember seeing this in a video. I think I mentioned this because I did, by the way, I did do an in-depth relationship analysis for Charles and Diana. So again, if you're curious, you can watch that. I'm going to try to find it and link it in the video description, but if not, you can look for it on my channel. And I did mention there that I remember this, as far as I remember, that I saw this interview where she was like, there are 3 people in my marriage, so it's a bit crowded. I mean, it's good that she was able to be humorous about it, even though you could see the sadness on her face. I mean, I saw this interview where she actually said this herself to an interviewer. And I think it was one of the last interviews that she gave before she passed. And it was really messed up. I mean, she really had a sad life in many ways, but she also had a lot of lucky experiences in life. But it did seem to me like she really loved Charles, and that was like the big love of her life. And she was never really happy because she had to deal with the fact that he was unfaithful. And yeah, Nessus conjunct Venus in the 7th house makes a lot of sense, like I said, especially with Venus ruling the 7th house and the 12th house. So it's almost like her being pitted against the mistress. It's a wonderful symbolic expression for exactly that, right? Because the 2 signs that Venus is ruling represent the wife and the mistress here in her situation. And I guess Nessus would be the husband, being an a-hole. There, I said it. And the impact being primarily on the 7th house. I think this would have also potentially impacted her sexuality, like maybe the way she expressed or felt about her sexuality. Oh, and let's not also forget, I mentioned this in the first part as in video 1 of this series, because this is part 2 of Nessus asteroid in connection to abuse, that in a woman's horoscope, of course, Venus would show how she feels about her attractiveness, her lovability. And so Nessus conjunct Venus definitely shows this impact, this massive hit on her self-esteem and her ability to feel lovable and attractive as a woman. Yeah, really messed up. And especially since it's also opposite the ascendant, again, would show the significant impact on her entire life trajectory. And we also have Pluto, Mars, Rahu, again, opposite Nessus, and Moon opposite Nessus as well. So a lot of types of abuse or a lot of impacts of the abuse on other areas of life. So again, Rahu potentially would show that this is something that was part of what she should have experienced. But like I said, I'm gonna do more research because I'm not gonna really vouch for a significant impact from Rahu when it's a square. Okay, if anything, I would be more likely to side with the Vedic aspects of Rahu in this situation when it comes to the Rahu topic. But then Mars square Nessus, again, would have shown abuse from a husband figure, potentially even some kind of sexual inappropriateness, although I don't know if that was something. She definitely didn't talk about it if there was anything. But also I know this is a controversial topic because a lot of people said that she was basically taken out by the royal family. But one way to interpret Mars opposite Nessus, especially with Nessus in the 7th house, would be, victim of, especially since Mars is in her 10th house in Magha Nakshatra, which connects to royalty, now that I think about it. Yeah, it could show abuse from royalty, literally, or people in high position, people who are kind of like your superiors with the 10th house. But it could also just show that she was a victim of her fame. So again, we may never know, what can I say, what the truth was fully. But also Moon would have shown abuse from mother figures, maybe her own mother. As far as I remember, actually, because I saw a documentary about her ages ago, she was not very close to either of her parents. And I do remember something about her feeling like she was all alone or something, like, so she really felt like her mother was not there. And in fact, I do remember talking about this before because of course her moon is conjunct K2. And so I talked about this in the bad childhoods videos that I did, that when K2 is conjunct the moon, this basically shows that the mother is perceived to be absent in a way, whether physically or emotionally, but somehow the person feels deprived of a mother figure. Okay. Another example is Selena, the famous Mexican singer who sadly passed away, I think, at the age of 23 or 24 back in the 90s because she was shot by her. I don't even remember what that was, like her manager or her assistant. She was a woman who worked for her, or was it her accountant? Anyway, but a woman who worked for her. And I was curious. I wanted to see if there was some kind of a connection there. So her Nessus is falling in 22 degrees Capricorn. Sorry, not Capricorn, Taurus, which I think is Rohini. Yeah, it is Rohini Nakshatra. And there is that rulership of the moon here in Rohini, so potentially a mother figure. And there is Mars, and that's violence, basically, because Mars is conjunct the moon. So I would say right off the bat, this would explain violence from a potential mother figure. I don't know if she saw that woman as a mother figure. I don't know if the woman was a mother figure. Was she? I don't know. Please let me know in the comment section. But I think she was definitely someone that she trusted, as far as I remember from what I saw. Because again, I saw a documentary about her ages ago. And then there is Venus opposite Nessus as well. You know, and Venus is very much, even if let me put it to you like this, even if this woman was not a mother, so if she wasn't a mother, she's definitely represented by Venus, because women who are mothers are moon, women who are not mothers are Venus. Okay, so either way, there would have been some potential abuse from a mother figure or some kind of a female figure. That's the bottom line. And Venus is falling in Purva Bhadrapada, which would show potentially a very two-faced woman, which makes a lot of sense. And then Nessus is opposite Jupiter. Now, again, I haven't looked or like I haven't done extensive research on her life, but Jupiter would potentially show maybe a religious figure, could also be a guru, a mentor, could even be her own father figure, who knows. So there could have been abuse happening from that side as well. Either way, this could have been, you know, her entire view of life being impacted by some form of abuse. And then there is Jupiter ruling the 12th house, which is, you know, hidden affairs, hidden things that are kept hidden from view. Potentially people who are doing things in the shadows, you know. And then there's also the rulership of Jupiter of the 3rd house, which would be people in the music business. So since she was operating in the music business, this could very much explain potential abuse that she may have experienced, who knows, from people in the business. I haven't heard of anything like this, but maybe she did, considering her placements. A 3rd house would be particularly relevant for composers, writers, stuff like that. People who play instruments. Okay, this is something that I could, see about her horoscope. And then another example is Sharon Stone. That I don't know if y'all have seen that, because Sharon Stone, or at least it showed up in my feed, she had an interview not too long ago with a podcast host on YouTube where she talked about her entire life story, and it was very impressive. I have to say, I always liked Sharon Stone, but I like her even more after listening to that video, and about the hardships she went through, and also about her more spiritual side and whatnot. She's a very interesting person, and she always seemed to me like a very determined, intelligent woman. And one of the reasons I wanted to look at her horoscope was because I watched, after that interview, I also watched snippets of other interviews, because I saw that she had sun in the seventh house, and I was really surprised when she said that she had a generally a good relationship with her father, even though it started out being very rocky, that by the end of his life they got really close. But that really drew my attention because it's something that I talked about in a members only video. So I was very curious to see if there were some other indicators that she went through abuse at the hands of a father figure, because um seventh house connections oftentimes, especially with the sun, can show some kind of abusive parental figures, especially father figures, right? And so I wanted to see, I was curious, I looked for information, and then I came across this interview she had with Oprah where she said that one of her grandfathers, now she didn't say if that was the paternal grandfather or maternal grandfather, but one of her grandfathers basically molested her when she was a child. And I was like, bingo, that even though that is not the actual biological father, that still counts as a father figure. Okay. And then I wanted to look at her Nessus situation to see if there's more indications of this. And well, Nessus is opposite Jupiter, but most importantly, it is falling in Aries. Okay. It's falling in Aries. It is in Kritika Nakshatra. And so Kritika is ruled by the sun. There is that connotation of a father figure because the sun connects to a father figure. And it's also opposite Jupiter. So in the ninth house, let me just take it step by step. Ninth house, again, is impact of the father, teachings of the father, how father figures impact your worldview. That would make a lot of sense. And furthermore, it is opposite Jupiter. And then Nessus is also conjunct her Ketu, which would show potentially a lot of, maybe having multiple lifetimes of having to deal with abuse, right? That kind of toughened her up in a way. But yeah, it's really relevant. And then on top of that, she also has Venus, Eros, and Mars conjunct opposite Nessus. Sorry, not opposite, square Nessus. Okay, so that would further emphasize potential sexual type of abuse, especially since Rahu is also, so Rahu, which is opposite Nessus, is the co-ruler of the seventh house. And Saturn, the other co-ruler of the seventh house, because seventh house is in Aquarius, is trine her Nessus as well. So this would also definitely show some kind of sexual abuse happening because of the connection between the seventh house and sexuality. And then the eighth house Lord Jupiter is opposite Nessus. So there's both of those sexuality related houses are connected to Nessus. And then Venus and Mars furthermore emphasize this because Venus and Mars both, and also with Eros then there in between them, are connected to sexuality. Okay. So yeah, it makes a lot of sense, sadly. And another example, let me see. Oh, Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson is the kind of person that a lot of people, he was open, as far as I understood. He was open about the kind of abuse he experienced, but then his siblings came out and talked about the abuse that he experienced. And I wanted to check his horoscope, of course. And his Nessus is in the fourth house, which makes a lot of sense. And it's opposite Saturn, which also makes a lot of sense. Because Saturn rules, again, people who have power over you, authority figures. Since his Saturn is in the 10th house, it also connects to the father. He was known to have a very authoritarian father figure, okay, that was extremely harsh in disciplining him, and according to his own words, as far as I understood, stole his childhood, quote unquote, basically. Because even though, a lot of people are looking at this from a mixed point of view, because they're saying, well, Michael Jackson wouldn't have been what he became without his father being as strict as he was. But the truth is that there was a lot of inappropriateness. So, and actually, more recently, I came across some videos that actually said there may have been sexual inappropriateness happening between, I don't know if it was Michael or it was like between his father, Michael's father, and sisters, like one of his sisters or something like that. So the father was extremely inappropriate either way, no matter how you look at it. So clearly a very abusive figure. And yes, Saturn being in the 10th house opposite his Nessus showed both his parents kind of collaborating and being abusive, because Nessus in the 4th house, first of all, would have shown abuse happening in that early stage of life, within the home, literally, because the 4th house is the home based. But then 4th house is also the mother side of the family. So he would have perceived his mother to be abusive, or again, kind of similarly to what I said about Kafka, which, you know, is the traditional model of parenting that has been going on since the dawn of time, which is that women were powerless to do anything to defend their children. And so if the father was abusive, the mother just had to sit there and basically hand him the belt. So it really seems like this is exactly what happened to Michael. Not only that, but his son in the 7th house, opposite Nessus, again, would have further emphasized. And again, notice that Nessus is in Kritika Nakshatra again, which is ruled by the sun. All right. So there's this double, triple actual symbolism of the father figure being abusive. Once because Saturn is in the 10th house, the house of the father's reputation, the father's profession. And then Sun being opposite Nessus directly from Leo, and then also Nessus being in a Sun-ruled nakshatra. All right. And Moon is also opposite Nessus. Sorry, square Nessus, because Moon is in Aquarius. So clearly, it's really interesting that whether you look at it from the 4th and 10th house polarity, or whether you look at it from the Moon and Sun polarity, his parents are in opposition. You know, like somehow they're in opposition, but yet working with one another. So I think his perspective was that basically his parents were united against him. It's really sad and really messed up. And this is the part where, because I've had a lot of people ask me this, do you take out of sign conjunctions into account? According to traditional astrology, Vedic astrology, there might be some influence to be taken into account when it's a very tight conjunction. And I would say maybe in this case, this is one of those cases where it's relevant. An out of sign conjunction is relevant because if you look at his Nessus, it's very close to his Mars. So his Mars is in 28 degrees, 45 minutes, Aries, which is also Kritika Nakshatra, and it's conjunct with Nessus in 2 degrees, 27 Taurus, which is also Kritika Nakshatra. And I have mentioned this in previous videos, maybe some of you remember that there were times when I have taken into account these out-of-sign conjunctions as long as they happen in the same nakshatra, and as long as they are very, very tight. This would be, like, not extremely tight, but also not negligible. It's like a 3-something, less than 4 degree difference anyway. And considering the fact that Mars and Nessus are in the same nakshatra, I would not be surprised if this Mars acted as if it was conjunct Nessus in this situation. But I would have to do more research. And of course, as usual, feel free to share anything in the comment section that, I don't know, of similar situations that you may know of someone who has Mars conjunct Nessus, let's say, in the same nakshatra out of sign, where it shows as very much still influential in the person's life. The conjunction, I mean. And yes, it's only with conjunctions. That's what I wanted to say. So with squares or trines or any other aspects, I would not take them into account. So out of sign aspects, basically. I would only take them into account maybe in these situations where it's out of sign, but they're still in the same nakshatra and it's a conjunction. Another example I looked at, another woman who mentioned that she was essayed by her stepfather, an actress called Sally Field. Her Nessus is in Bharani Nakshatra in the 8th house. Oh gosh, I want to unsee this. I really want to unsee it, but it's so relevant. Not only that, it's opposite Sun and Jupiter. So, okay. I feel like I don't even have to say anything because it's so obvious, but I'm going to break it down. So, Nessus, again, happens to be in Bharani Nakshatra, there is a theme of incest with Bharani Nakshatra. Okay, this would be actually an interesting study to be done. Feel free to collect information and share them in the comment section if you come across anything, because I am curious. So if you have Nessus in Bharani Nakshatra, or you know anyone who has Nessus in Bharani Nakshatra and they have experienced especially these kinds of borderline incestuous sort of situations, but any kind of SA would be really kind of connected to Bharani, especially if the victim is a woman, because like I said, Bharani is ruled by Venus, okay, and it's very much connected to the female reproductive system, so it would make sense that it's more prone to things like SA. Again, I don't want to make anyone paranoid, but if you have a daughter with Nessus in Bharani, I would definitely be not taking any unnecessary risks with her safety, or leave her unsupervised with male figures, even relatives. Yes, I'm grossed out to say this, but I mean, here we have an example like this. But anyway, so Nessus being in the 8th house, again, very hidden, things that are hidden from view, things that are taboo, again, in Bharani would show incestuous situations. And then opposites, Sun and Jupiter, which are both connected to a father figure, yes, it very much makes sense to describe the kind of abuse that she suffered. And furthermore, this Nessus is square Pluto and Saturn. So again, there would have been some kind of power abuse, you know, being abused by someone who had power over you. And then Saturn, again, being a figure of authority, someone who had control. And also, Saturn rules traditions. I've said this in other videos, and because I hate to use the word patriarchy, because for a long time I thought it sounded kind of silly, but I can't think of a better way to call it. The truth is that for most of human history, men have had power over women and they have abused women. And since Saturn rules tradition, Saturn kind of connects to things like the patriarchy, because for most of human history it has been traditional for men to be misogynists, right? So it would make sense, is what I'm trying to say, that for women who have hard aspects from Saturn to their Nessus, that they might be prone to this kind of abuse coming from male authority figures, right? Yeah, this is pretty much like what I wanted to say. I mean, her time of birth is known, obviously, because I did mention her houses. And I think furthermore, one more thing that I wanted to say is, you know, her sun being weak, sun being with Jupiter debilitated, and technically Jupiter would have the ability to wash away a lot of negative impact of, so I don't know what her full story is, to be fair, because Jupiter conjunct the sun, even though the sun is debilitated, it would technically show that she still had some strength, like she still had some positivity coming from a male paternal figure. So maybe this was her biological father. I don't know what her full story is. So maybe she got along with her biological father, but the stepfather was abusive, something. But it shows like a really mixed situation, you know. And either way, Jupiter being in Libra is not a particularly strong placement for Jupiter. And if I'm not mistaken, this is Swati Nakshatra. Let me see. Jupiter, sorry, Sun, 20 degrees. This might be Vishaka, but I'm not sure. Let me see. 20 degrees. Yeah, so her Sun is in Vishaka Nakshatra. Vishaka Nakshatra is a nakshatra that really does not have positive connotations. I think I talked about it in other videos again, especially when it comes to having abusive parents. I have seen this nakshatra show up a lot, in terms of people who had, you know, abusive parents having placements, especially these placements. So the sun representing the father figure in Vishaka, the moon representing the mother figure in Vishaka, so they can show abusive parental figures. So, even though, again, you would think, well, Sun in Vishaka Nakshatra, aspected by Jupiter, would be more positive, I think it wasn't positive enough to overcome the negative impact here in her horoscope. And I think what really kind of tipped the scale against her is also having Rahu in the 9th house, you know? So, Rahu in the 9th house, again, I'm going to hold this thought, please remind me at some point if you're curious to see maybe research done on this topic. But it kind of makes me think that this would be the kind of placement that shows up frequently in the horoscopes of people who have stepfathers or some kind of unusual father figure, because Rahu is unconventionality. Rahu is foreign elements. I wonder if her stepfather was from a foreign background or her father was from a foreign background. But yeah, would have been some foreign unconventional influence around the father figure, because ninth house is the father figure. All right. So either way, sadly, it does explain her experiences. Did I have any other example? Oh, another example was Tina Turner. Let me see. I haven't even looked at her horoscope actually, but I do remember I calculated it because oh yeah, there it is. Yeah. So I haven't looked into Ike Turner's horoscope because, anyway, if you're curious, please let me know. I'm going to do more research in the future with respect to how Nessus might play out in synastry. But so far, I have not. But again, I'm not going to say it's yes or no because I haven't actually done research. I have kind of looked at a few horoscopes, but not enough. Like maybe a handful where I would, looked for things like if people were in abusive relationships, did they have like some strong Nessus aspects between the horoscope they have with their abuser. But as far as I've seen, it's not relevant so far, as far as I've seen. Okay, I'm holding that thought. Maybe I'm going to do more research. If I find a pattern, of course, I'm going to do a video about it in the future. If you are curious, of course, feel free to start your own research and maybe share your findings in the comment section with respect to whether you see, I don't know, people in abusive relationships having strong Nessus contacts. But anyway, what you see in Tina Turner's horoscope is the fact that, again, she has Nessus conjunct Saturn in the 10th house. So technically, again, the 10th house being connected to the father archetype, this could have shown that she experienced abuse from her father figure. I have not looked into this extensively, so if anyone knows, feel free to share in the comment section. But Nessus being, again, 6 degrees Aries, and it's conjunct Ketu, this could have shown many lifetimes of abuse because it's falling in Ashwini Nakshatra and it's conjunct Ketu, which connects to past life experiences. So it could have been someone who has experienced repeated patterns of receiving a lot of abuse. And especially with the Saturn conjunction, this could have been a person who maybe was oftentimes in a underprivileged position. How should I put it? Like abused by superiors, for instance. Again, could have been victimized by the rule of law, because Saturn represents laws and lawmakers. And 10th house, again, has to deal with the government officials, the lawmakers. So this could have been her experiencing abuse from, again, I don't know her full story, but this could have even been experiencing abuse from like managers, for instance, or people who are managing her career, her finances. Also maybe states, governments, I don't know, trying to take her money in all kinds of abusive ways. Stuff like that could have happened. But Ketu is co-ruling the 5th house. Saturn and Nessus are both in Ashwini. So Ketu is co-ruling the 5th house. So that means the lord of her 5th house is conjunct Nessus. 5th house does rule creativity, entertainment industry. It does rule affairs. Sorry. As in love affairs, like love interest. So this could have been abusive relationships from, I don't know, was she? I think she was, this was her husband, Ike Turner. Oh, but of course, again, I am failing to notice the elephant in the room. Saturn is ruling her 7th house, so that makes sense, of course, because her husband archetype is abusive first and foremost. But Fifth house again could definitely be, this could also be children, by the way. So again, I don't know what her relationship with her children was, but potentially could have been abuse at the hands of a child in one way or another, or children in general, although that's more far-fetched as a scenario. But yeah, Saturn ruling the seventh house again makes a lot of sense for someone who would have had an abusive spouse, unfortunately, especially since Saturn is also ruling the eighth house. This is again connected to taboo subjects. It's connected to things that are kept hush hush, that are hidden behind closed doors. And the fact that it's falling in her 10th house, her house of career, would show that this person it would explain a spouse that was controlling and abusive when it came to her career, or impacting her career, and of course her social status, ultimately, like the way that she ended up being viewed by the world. Yeah, so this is pretty much as far as I can see. These are the main aspects. There's also, again, the Pluto aspect to Nessus. So this Pluto square to Nessus does show up quite an awful lot in the situations of abuse. Sorry, I moved my mic if you heard a weird bump. And I think it's worth looking at more in depth, but I'm probably going to look at that, of course, at some point in the future. It doesn't surprise me, since Pluto stands for power struggles and Nessus is also connected to abuse, so it would make sense that Pluto and Nessus together would spell trouble. And I think these are pretty much all of the examples that I came across. There is this other example that I wanted to talk about, but this is a non-famous example, and so you're gonna have to take my word for it. This is a person that I used to know online, and already I know that sounds kind of like, oh, well, how well can you know someone online? But again, without getting too much into details, this is someone that I've known for many years, and I have no reason to believe that he would have been deceptive towards me. And he confided in me that basically he was sent to a juvenile detention place when he was in his teens because he accidentally hurt someone in school. Basically, a person was bullying him and he tried to defend himself and pushed this kid, and this kid ended up dying because he hit his head on a rock. And so he was sent to a juvenile detention for, murder. I don't know what it's called, but basically accidental murder. And he ended up being essayed in this correctional facility. He didn't give more details with respect to who it was. He didn't say if it was, his peers, or if it was a, figure of authority, but it definitely happened. And I knew he gave me his time of birth, so I looked at his horoscope out of curiosity. I think I also mentioned him before because he has Mars and Saturn and Pluto, now that I look at it, in the fifth house. I mentioned him I'm pretty sure when I talked about Teal Swan's horoscope, because I said that she had, as far as I remember, I'm not 100% sure, but I think she had the same conjunction of Mars and Saturn in the fifth house. And I talked about how fifth house, and I've seen this a lot, malefics in the fifth house tend to show extreme bullying, extreme abuse happening in childhood, or one way or another being attacked for just being yourself, feeling like you cannot be yourself, your authentic self, because that's what the fifth house stands for. Fifth house can also be romantic affairs, or like abusive romantic affairs, but so in his case, I think it really explains the situation he was in, because his Nessus is in Cancer in the second house. So he didn't give me too many details about his family of origin, but he did say that his father was an alcoholic. Even though he spoke very fondly of his father, I mean, generally people who are alcoholic are not very present in their children's lives and can end up being abusive, at least through neglect, or, by just not being involved enough. So yeah, even though he spoke highly of his father, having Nessus in the second house technically would show some kind of abuse happening in early childhood, or like within the family of origin. And with respect to Nessus being in 16 degrees Cancer. Let me see. 16 degrees and 6 minutes. Yeah, so this is Pushya Nakshatra. And Pushya Nakshatra is ruled by Saturn. So Saturn rules, again, authority figures, older people. And if you look at his horoscope, Nessus is also square Mars, Pluto. Again, here we have that Pluto square. I have to say, like, Pluto square Nessus is becoming one of those aspects that's going to be on my watch for people who experience some serious abuse. Because, again, like I said, I wouldn't be surprised. I have not particularly targeted this aspect for research, but I wouldn't be surprised if it showed higher than average likelihood of someone experiencing abuse, since Pluto stands for power struggles. Yeah. And in his horoscope, he has Saturn squared Nessus. So again, abuse coming from authority figures, people who are in charge of regulation, people who are older. Mars, again, can show male peers, could show potentially siblings as well, male siblings. I do know he had a brother, so I don't know what his relationship with his brother was. But anyway, it could show just abuse from other male figures. And once again, Mars standing for, male sexuality and also physical things in general, like muscle mass, physical, mechanical forms of aggression, is very much, again, justifying the type of abuse that he experienced because of this square between Nessus and Mars. And then there's Sun opposite Nessus, which again makes me think that there may have been potential abuse happening from the father. But even if it wasn't the actual biological father, which again, is less likely because he spoke fondly of his father. Now, it is possible, of course, that he just idealized his father, because that happens a lot with people who grew up in really dysfunctional families. But either way, the Sun would not just necessarily show the biological father, but it could show father figures. Okay, so like people that you look up to as a kind of paternal figure, basically. So this would make sense, basically. This is an example that I looked at more out of my personal curiosity, but I also, thought that I should share it since I looked at it either way. But again, since this is one of the reasons why, because I've had people over the years be like, why don't you share more horoscopes of, random people? But when it comes to like regular people, there's no way to actually verify anything that I'm talking about, right? So, I could tell you their life stories and stuff that they told me, but you're going to have to take my word for it. That's one of the main reasons I don't talk about it. And then there's the issue of course, a lot of people don't want to be talked about. So, even if it's anonymous, they're just like, yeah, never mind. I don't want my personal horoscope to be displayed. But yeah, this has been pretty much it. So obviously not the case with this last person. He was very much into astrology and did not mind me sharing his information, but I'm just saying, there are people who, for superstitious reasons or whatever, they don't want their personal topics, issues, whatever, being discussed, even if it's anonymous. But yeah, this has been pretty much it. This has been the main topic of Nessus. Thus endeth the video on Asteroid Nessus and abuse according to the natal chart. I really hope you have enjoyed this. As usual, feel free to share anything you would like to share with respect to this topic, your personal experiences that you know from other people that you maybe know very well, how this that might illustrate how this information that I presented is relevant, how it's accurate, or maybe how it doesn't really check out according to what you found, or any questions that you might have associated to this topic. Please let me know in the comment section. And aside from that, of course, if you have enjoyed the video, do not forget to like the video, subscribe to my channel, click on the notifications bell to see when I will post a new video. Also, if you are interested in a private reading, check out the video description. I have left my email address there, so you can email me for a pricing list, reading options, any other information you're curious about. I do not save your emails and I don't spam people. I feel like I should say that because I have had questions about it, so you shouldn't feel anxious about dropping me an email just to ask for information if you're curious. Aside from that, if you're interested, of course, in getting more exclusive content, extra content, check out the video description and the join button for more information about the membership section. I have not posted, I admit, I have not posted any videos there, I think in about a month at least, 1 or 2 months. I have been extremely busy, but I do have plans on posting very, very soon. I have some ideas. I have a lot of ideas always in my head. I just have to make some time to post, but I already have posted tons of videos in the membership only sections, and you can find them if you search for members or members only videos or keywords like member on my channel, so you can see the videos I posted so far, and you can also see them in the playlist that I linked in the video description per membership tier. So the general rule is tier 1 has access to everything from tier 1, tier 2 has access to all the videos from tier 1 and tier 2, tier 3 has access to all the videos basically. And aside from that, of course, if you would like to support my channel further, you can do so by leaving a donation through the $ button under the video. Any amount is much appreciated. You can also support the channel further by sharing my content with anyone you know who might be interested in astrology. And last but not least, I also have a tarot channel, as many of you already know. It's called Martine's Tarot, and I will be linking it in the video description. That channel is way younger than this one. I think it's only about 4 years old. This one is 10 years old. And so I have definitely started tarot at a later stage, more in depth, because I have dabbled in it for many times on and off throughout my life, but I really got into it about 5 years ago. And yes, I don't have to tell you all this again if you are already subscribed to my channel, because you probably already know what my reading style is and all that. But for those of you who are new to my channel and you are also interested in tarot, please check out my tarot channel as well, especially if you like pick a card readings. Maybe subscribe to it. It's called Martine's Tarot. Again, I would greatly appreciate it, and I would love to see you there as well. And yeah, this has been pretty much what I wanted to say. Thank you once again for those of you who have listened to the full video. A special thank you for all of those who have. Give yourselves a nice big pat on the back for having listened to my entire rant, and I hope that you find this useful and you make the most of this information. And I hope you are going to join me at my next video on my astrology channel and my tarot channel if you're interested in tarot. Okay, bye!